have to apologize for one thing. I noticed late last night in your schedule, which is the yellow sheet in your folders, that we're having a PAN discussion at 2 o'clock. So panel members, that does mean you. And so I decided rather than stay up late and be really tired this morning and correcting all of that, that you would understand. So thanks.
Well, I think she kind of overdid the introduction for just the MC. I'm not talking about anything specific here. I'm just introducing the other speakers, basically, and a few housekeeping announcements. So I'm sure you're all interested. This is the first time we've held this here in this room. For those of you not familiar with this lovely conference room, the bathrooms are right behind that wall. So just to the right around the corner for restrooms. We have coffee, tea, water, and a few treats or snacks over here. Feel free to help yourself for that. Would like to point out that we do have some display booths in the back, people who have more information for you. Birthright is represented, Clarity Clinic, Mary's Inn, Couple to Couple League, and the fertility care practitioners are in the back and anxious to speak with you and answer your questions on a one-to-one basis if you have those. And of course, Dubuque County Right to Life. We will be having a break later in the morning as well as lunch. And lunch is scheduled, I don't have it with me, 11:45. Yes, lunch is scheduled for 11:45, so you can keep that in mind. But we'll have a break before that as well. For questions, each of the speakers may let you know how they want questions handled, whether they're comfortable with you interrupting them during their talk or whether they prefer that you hold your questions to the end of their particular talk. They may offer a question and answer period. There are also pens and papers on your table. If you're uncomfortable asking your question out loud, feel free to write it down and then hand it to somebody at another table to bring up to us so nobody knows that you wrote it. Actually, Trina in the back will be happy to gather any of those questions. So if you have questions at your table, just flag Trina and she'll pick up those questions for the speakers. Another good opportunity for having those questions answered, of course, is during the panel discussion at the end of the day. But for many of us, saving them that long is, you might need that question answered right away and get it off your mind so you can concentrate on the rest of the talks. So that's how today is going to go. For nurses, everyone has one of these in their packet, but it only applies to those who are requesting CEUs. So the nurses in the room requesting CEUs for continuing education, please make sure you complete this form accurately and fully. For everyone, you also have an evaluation form in your packet. We would like everyone to complete the evaluation form. It's necessary for those requesting CEUs, but it's good feedback for all of us if we have that kind of feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. So we make sure that we get that kind of comment from you about this. I noticed some familiar faces from last year's conference in this room. That's because they know the quality of these speakers and of this conference today. And the new faces, you're in for a treat. Let us begin with prayer. This is a prayer of Mary Stuart, who was Mary, Queen of the Scots. Keep me, O God, from pettiness. Let us be large in thought, in word, in deed. Let us be done with fault-finding and leave off self-seeking. May we put away all pretense and meet each other face to face without self-pity and without prejudice. May we never be hasty in judgment and always be generous. Let us take time for all things. Make us grow calm, serene, and gentle. Teach us to put into action our better impulses, to be straightforward and unafraid. Grant that we may realize that it is the little things of life that create differences, that in the big things of life, we are all one. And, O Lord God, let us not forget to be kind. Amen. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, known to many of you through many of her writings and appearances at other conferences. Vicki Thorn has a degree in psychology from the University of Minnesota. She has earned a certificate in spiritual direction and also a certificate in trauma counseling from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Vicki is the foundress of Project Rachel and the executive director of the National Office of Post-Abortion Reconciliation and Healing, located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She is an international speaker and author on the topics of abortion's aftermath in women, men, families, society, as well as the process of post-abortion healing. Vicki has also written about the role of stress in making the abortion decision and how to help women in crisis pregnancies. Vicki has extensively studied the science of fertility and hormones. She has spoken internationally on the topics of biochemistry of sex, gender, bonding, and attachment. As a corresponding member of the Pontifical Academy of Life, her work has led her to study current research about the biochemistry of sex and the effects of hormonal birth control. She and her husband, Professor William Thorn, reside in Milwaukee and are the parents of 6 young adults. Vicki has prepared for you a resource, a couple of sheets of resources that online links for you for further information about all of the topics that she's talking about, all of the scientific background to these topics that she will be mentioning that verify her work and her message today. This will be available to you in the back of the room at the Dubuque County Right to Life table. So feel free, if she's mentioning something or some reference, you don't have to jot it down then. It will be provided for you at the back, and you can pick one up at break or at lunch. So let us all give a warm welcome to Vicki Thorn.
I'm going to correct one thing she said, write it down anyway, because otherwise you won't remember what you've been looking for, okay? And I apologize, it's not really in any particular form. It's things I've added to the list over time. It's a little more contemporary. The material I'm talking about today is really about 60 books worth and a ton of online journal stuff. And as we go through this, what I want to say to you, a couple of things first. It dawned on me this morning, I hate when I wake up with something in my head. You know, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I've been thinking in my sleep. You know, we're a sex-obsessed society. Everything, you know, you go into Yahoo, there's something about somebody with, you know, a crazy photo or lawsuits or something sexual, all right? And as a society, what that has done, I believe, is made us numb. That sex is a recreational activity, basically without consequence. I mean, we've got contraceptives to keep us, quote unquote, pregnant, from getting pregnant, you know, and well, if you do, you've got abortion as a backup. And if, you know, that's so safe, I mean, that's what they tell you. And so not to worry, but if it does leave you infertile, well, now we've got all of reproductive technology there, which really has some serious bioethical issues, all right? But this awareness that it's all about making sex really center point, all right? You know, the new conversations about our teenagers and how really we should help them with long-term contraceptives, whether it's IUDs with hormonal implantation or with copper implantation, or the new 3-year put it in your arm, but oh my goodness, check it periodically because if it breaks, you better be using something else quick. There's all this focus. And now the concept that, you know, our pediatricians are supposed to start talking to our children about sex and, you know, the benefits of contraceptives and little, okay? What's that all about? It's certainly about taking away the power of the parent, for starters, but it's also not teaching them to honor their bodies. We live in a society where we are disembodied, many of us, you know, it's all what happens right here and my intention. So if my intention is to have sex and not get connected with someone, well, of course, that's what happens. Oh, you couldn't be further from the truth because you can't turn off your body. But it's about learning enough about our body to truly appreciate the complexity with which we're made. And when we mess with that, okay, what happens? And so I'm going to cover a lot of material in a really, short period of time, but hopefully it's enough to give you an appreciation of this. Again, we're fearfully and awesomely made, and we need to communicate that to our young people. I do this talk a lot. You're going to get the adult. But I do it a lot, high schools, colleges. People will come who, have heard me in high school, and they're now in college, and they bring me to the campus, because they said, my friends have to hear this. They've heard the talk 4 or 5 times, and this happens all the time, and I'm like, why? Because I hear something different every time. So I'm more mature. The first time I heard it, I got stuck on this piece of information over here, and then now I've moved past that piece, so now I'm ready to hear the rest of it or integrate it in a different fashion. This sort of approach in talking to young people is valuable because we need to understand that the human brain from age 11 to 19 is rewiring itself. The prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of the brain, is not working so well, all right? And also that the research indicates that if I was stressed when I was young, and many, many, many of our young people have it, that's a different talk, the part of the brain where moral development lies doesn't come online when it's supposed to. It comes online at some point, but it could be years afterwards. So when we try to do moral presentations, they can't necessarily hear us. It's like we're speaking Greek. This material is self-preservation driven. That's the part of the brain that's running things anyway. So let's talk to it, okay? So hopefully you'll find this all valuable. And your question probably is how do I get involved in doing this? And actually, this particular part came out of a very personal experience. When I had our 4th child, I met a woman who lived near me. We were introduced by a mutual friend. She lived down the block, down the alley, where we'd never met each other. And we had kids kind of the same age. They went to the same school, went to the same church, and we got to be really good friends. And we babysat for each other and did all that sort of thing. And when our 5th kids were born, they were born about 2 months apart. And when our 6 kids were due, they were due the same day. And I really didn't think that would happen. I thought that was one of those coincidence things, Well, how it played out is that at midnight on the 23rd of March, I went to the hospital, and our daughter Miriam was born at 7 a.m. Before Miriam was born, my friend Joan is in the next room in labor with John. John took a nap. His birthday is the 25th, but they're born within 24 hours. And I thought that was weird. All right, tuck it away in the back of your head. I belong to a group called the Association of Pre- and Perinatal Psychology and Health. It's the most interesting group I belong to. They have the most fascinating speakers, and it's this very eclectic group of everybody. There's some doctors, there's researchers, there's therapists, there's midwives, there's doulas, there's everybody in the group. And they're not afraid to talk about the significance of what happens in utero, starting with conception, all right? That how we're conceived can change us. Is it rape? Is it, is it love? Is it whatever? What happens in utero can change us. How we're born can change us. Those early first 3 years of life in terms of stress can change us. So I'm coming home from this conference, and I'm reading a book on the anthropology of mothering, and this woman, whose name is Sarah Hurdy, H-R-D-Y, explained what had happened with me and Joan, and now I was hooked. All right, that's what set this all up. Because you see, we women are designed to be in a hormonal dance. When we spend time with each other, we will cycle together. So we don't have to be relatives. It's presence, right? It takes about 3 months for this to happen. So if you're in a dorm, in about 3 months, there's 1 week from hell, and then the rest of the time it's pretty cool. But the reality is that chemical contraceptives interfere with this because they lead us to believe we're in a dance with someone else, all right? Now, why would we need to be in the dance? Because long ago, when women lived in community, you guys were out hunting and seafaring, you were gone a lot of the time, and we women were home with the kids. And in this community, it was critical that we be in this cycle together because if I died, the only way my child would survive, because we didn't have formula, we didn't have bottles, is if another woman had a baby the same age as mine and was invested emotionally in the survival of my child, all right? These people were not necessarily blood relatives, but they became kin, which are relatives by intention, all right? And so it was important that women gave birth at the same time, because toddler milk and newborn milk is not the same. A newborn cannot survive on toddler milk, all right? And toddler milk, you know, the vice versa, they have different components in them. And so that was the explanation, and it made a lot of sense, okay? And that's what led to what you're going to hear today, all right? Now, I want to start by talking to you just for a moment about how interconnected we are. Because we live in a society that wants us to believe that there isn't connection, okay? I can just move with impunity and my relatives don't really matter. And this even goes into some of the reproductive technology, you know. I'm birthed by one woman, but it's an ovum from someone else and it's sperm from a man I've never had sex with. And I'll say a little bit about that, but the dangers of that in terms of just our existence. Who am I? It's one of our existential questions, all right? How do I know that? You know, the question now about implanting mitochondrial DNA from one woman into another woman's cell and then we'll make a baby from that. What is that all about, okay? So first off, I want to say to you that the Chinese maintain that we're more likely to get the diseases of our grandmother, all right? That being grandma, that being mom, that being you. Now, why is that? Because what happened to grandma when she was pregnant with mom changed all the ovum in our woman bodies. Our ovum are there at 20 weeks into a pregnancy, all right? 20 weeks, that's halfway. At first there's 6 million, and then when we're born there's about 2 million. By the time we get our period, we're down to about 400 to 450,000, all right? Average lifetime we women have 400 to 450 periods, all right? So this awareness of change, stress, illness, all of those things can change the ovum. It doesn't change the genetics. It changes how it's turned on and what's turned on. And it's an unfolding field of what's called epigenetics, all right? And this can be generational. All right? If my ovum are changed, then my daughters may be changed by that. And their daughters in turn may be changed by that. And we used to think it was only on the woman's side. Now again, this is a fairly new piece of research, but some of this was really done a long time ago. And they discovered that you gentlemen, your Y, also can have epigenetic changes. What's turned on, what's turned off. Some of the first work was done with the famine in Netherlands after or during in that World War II period of time. And they discovered that the sons of the men who were in the famine had certain health issues. Diabetes, certain types of cancer, heart issues, consistently. You know, I scratched our heads because we didn't know very much about this stuff at that time. But this awareness of, again, interconnection is important for us, all right? Now, that also means that chemistry that's in my body may have long-term fallout as well. Some of us in this room would have had mothers or grandmothers who received DES, diethylstilbestrol, while they were pregnant. This was a high-test estrogen given to women who were threatening miscarriage from the 40s through the 70s, early 70s. And as often happens sometimes in medicine, some is good, more is better, it became a generic that was given to women. There were 40 kinds of generic DES. Women were simply told, this is one of your pregnancy supplements, all right? We know that the impact of that high-test estrogen is now into the third and fourth generation of offspring, both female and male, all right? The daughters of these women, my generation of women, one of my best friends had a full hysterectomy at age 16 because she had clear cell adenocarcinoma. Old woman's cancer, very deadly, caused by DES. There were breast cancer issues, there were tons of issues. And there is, in fact, an ongoing DES action coalition of those who are survivors, inheritors of the issues. Even the CDC writes about these second and third, fourth generation issues. Sons with deformed genitalia, grandsons, decreased fertility issues, women with bifurcated uteruses directly related to DES, impossible to carry a baby or very difficult because of this wall that's in the middle of your uterus. There's now a strange anomaly that's turning up in women in their 20s and 30s. It's a kind of ovarian cyst anomaly, but it's not polycystic ovaries. And they believe there appears to be this link back. Now, see, the problem for many of us is we don't know if Grandma took it. It's not in Grandma's records, all right? We don't, Grandma may long be deceased. She wouldn't know. But many of us may be at risk for this because there were millions of women who were touched. So again, that question of long-term outcomes of hormonal issues is a real serious one, okay? Now, another thing about how we're interrelated across generations, and that is that everybody in the world, that's what I said, carries the mitochondria of their mothers, all right? Now, the mitochondria are the energy bodies in your cells, but it's not just your mothers, it's your mothers, line back to 7 lines of women with the scientific implication of an Eve. It's the work of a man by the name of Brian Sykes who's reported it. This is an enormous issue. National Geographic would be happy to take some of your money, and they send you a little swab, you send them a little cheek cell sample, and they will tell you which of the 7 lines of women you came from and what their migrational pattern through history is. It's very interesting, right? Well, Sykes was wondering if there was something else that had this kind of longevity, and he went to a conference, and there was another guy named Sykes there, and somebody said, hey, you guys related? He goes, I don't think so. And then he started wondering, and what he discovered is that, gentlemen, you're Y, okay, we women are XX, you guys are XY, has the same kind of longevity, eons and eons. And the Y actually carries markers. So one of the things they discovered is that in the Jewish community where they have the tradition of the priestly caste, there's actually a marker on the Y for the members of the priestly caste. And it was interesting because when this was first being written about, U.S. News and World Report had a piece they did on looking at the Y and all that, and lo and behold, there was a Hispanic priest in New Mexico who had the priestly marker. But now, remember, historically, in Spain, which is where his line would have come from, there was a large Jewish community. But this question of across generations is important for us to understand, all right? You know, and you look at Scripture, there are those readings about who begat, who begat, who begat, who cares, right? Go back and reread them, because there's the woman's line and there's the man's line. How the heck did they know that back then? Why was that important? Okay? Because it's part of who we are, right? Now, I want to say just a brief little bit about men and women's brains, because we live in a society that touts gender neutrality. And I want to say to you that be careful what you read, because really look at the brain scan issues, look at the people that are doing the science and not sort of the I don't think this is true science. You know, I'm the mother of 6. When our kids were little, gender neutrality was, you know, putting its toe in the water, and you were supposed to give your daughters trucks. We did, 4 of them. Those trucks never got taken apart. They got birthday parties, they got blankets and naps and names, and I do think one of my daughters might have taken one apart because she can change her own brakes. But she never acknowledged that she did that. Okay, son's got dolls, they're 8 years apart. Oldest son discovered that his doll made a great football, and in about a month and a half, he and the kid down the block had worn out the doll. It never had a name, a party, nothing, okay? Second son got a doll, it was called a Buddy doll. Some of you will remember Buddy, they were boy dolls with, you know, tools and all that. He liked his Buddy doll. And then one Saturday we went to the grocery store and the older brother decided they should play a game, and it was called Sacrifice the Buddy doll. And that's not a girl game either, all right? And when he told us about it, I said, well, I don't know what to tell you other than I'm sorry. You know, and in midlife, when you have to go to therapy, because we all do now, you got something to talk about. He said, yes, I do. So we think there were perhaps more brother stories even than we heard, okay? But the awareness of difference, all right? And this is going to be a simplification, but I'll share something with you that came up long ago at a conference I gave and it was a Canadian psychiatrist, a man, and a Catholic sister from California. And they concluded that this is a diagram of a male brain. It is a series of boxes. Because men have an incredible gift of being linear thinkers and being able to focus. I know we women do not understand this, but they can focus and stay focused, all right? And, you know, they kind of got to go through all the boxes to think their way through something. I was out in California, and there's a man out there who runs a school, kindergarten through 12th grade, and in every classroom there's a girl classroom and a boy classroom, because boys and girls learn differently. Boys, one command at a time, parents, all right? You know, you're in a classroom setting and, you know, the teacher says, take out your paper, your pencil, and put your name at the top of the page. We girls, we're all over that. You guys don't get any further than a piece of paper. Okay? Spitballs, airplanes, drawing. And what do we say? Well, he's attention deficit disorder. No, he's a male. He thinks different. Okay, we have to understand that, all right? Now, this guy also told me something I didn't know. I've been married to my husband a long time. One of these boxes is empty. And when we women say to him, what are you thinking about? And he says, nothing. Okay, he can do that. All right? Part of that has to do with the fact, I believe, that when men were hunting and seafaring, they would do what was called fire gazing. And at the end of the day, they would gather around the fire and sit companionably side by side, but really not talk about much, just sort of regroup. I think that's related to that still, okay? See it in bars, too. Boys are all drinking their beer, all right? We're watching the game, maybe, but we're not saying much. Okay, we little, but we aren't intense in conversation, okay? A woman's brain could be illustrated in this fashion. We're multitaskers. Now, some women are linear thinkers, some guys are multitaskers. It's okay, you just have to know how you think. But the majority, we fall into this. We women can do the following. We can observe that the cat's thrown up, the toddler's gone outside, supper's burning, and I have to go to the bathroom. And usually we don't have casualties, all right? Because why? Again, we were in that community, confined community, living with others, watching the children, knowing when to go gather food, where was danger, okay? That's what this is about, okay? And so to appreciate that these are complementary brain states, all right? Those of you who have men in your life, here's something you need to know. When they're reading, hearing is turned off. So do not give them any instructions that require life and death, or that they, you know, make sure they acknowledge that they heard you, because seriously, the male brain works differently. It's wired differently. We women have language and emotion all over our brain, little sites. If we have brain damage, we'll probably get our language back, because our brain is plastic, it'll rewire. Men's language is on the left side of the brain. If there's damage, they may permanently lose their language. We say to men, tell us how you feel, dear. He can't, because his feelings section of the brain is over by the amygdala. It's a different part of the brain. He cannot emote at the drop of a hat like we women can, okay? Because we're accessing emotion all the time. It's right next to everything, all right? So we have to ask him and give him time to go process and to understand those things, because it changes our relationships. You don't get so, you know, incredibly annoyed. What do you mean you can't tell me how you feel? Well, I can't, all right? That's why he has to go think about it, process, come back, all right? So that's the short version of that, but I share it because it is important for us to understand. And there is the work of a man by the name of Leonard Sachs, and I don't think he's on your list, S-A-X, who wrote a book called Why Gender Matters. It's a very, very, very good book, but talks about the differences in how we perceive. Okay, men perceive visually distance better than women. We are better with peripheral vision. We see more colors and find discriminations. Guys don't tend to see as many colors. There's just a lot of these kind of changes. There's something called emotional memory that I'll come back to later, but emotional memory, if I showed you all a picture of an accident, men focus on the core of the accident. We women take in the peripheral stuff, all right? It's a difference in how we perceive things, okay? Again, this isn't about, you know, we're better than them or whatever. It's about complementarity and appreciating that there are differences in how we perceive the world based on our brain, okay? Now, this thing that happened with my friend and myself is something called pheromones. This is what it's under the control of, P-H-E-R-E-O-R-O-M-O-N-E-S, pheromones. Pheromones are scent molecules of affiliation. Some people say, oh no, humans don't have them. Every other creature does. And those who've done the research on pheromones know we do perceive them. They communicate about relationships, all right? And they're perceived by two little pits in the septum of your nose with a nerve that sits right here in front of where the perfume nerve, okay? It's in front of the olfactory nerve. It's very, very fragile. But it tells us lots of things, okay? So the first thing that I want to say to you is that we women are cycling together because of these pheromones, all right? There is a dominant female in there usually. They don't quite know what that's about, but usually there's one that will set everybody else's cycle, all right? Now, we women were given a gift by Mother Nature, by God, whoever put all this together. I don't believe it was two dust bunnies that glided in space, because it's way too complicated for two dust bunnies. When we women meet a man, the first thing we observe is pheromones. Not consciously, unconsciously. He smells nice. There's an attraction. Or he doesn't smell nice. But the one who smells nice to us, this is a complementary relationship based on something called the MHC complex. Okay? That's our immune system signal. And he's quite different than I am. You see, there's just this little overlap here. And that little overlap has to do with my father's immune system. Okay? I don't know exactly what it is. I haven't been able to find it, but that's what they maintain. This is from our father. All right? If I am chemically contracepting, my perception changes and my preference changes. And this is a serious issue. I am now attracted to a male whose immune system is very much like my own, like my father, like my brother. Why is that an issue? Because this is a fertility possibility. This is a fertility challenge for starters. If we do conceive children, our children are going to carry an immune system that's very much like my own. If this is my partner, it takes, by the way, 6 months for my body to make the adaptation to the sperm of my partner. Again, just immune system. You get pregnant the first time you have sex. I'll explain that to you in a minute. But this is different. My body goes, oh yeah, those are the kids. Yeah, okay. No reaction. Here, those cells are so much like my own that my body is saying, is that me or not? And may launch an autoimmune attack. If I go off the pill, I no longer find my husband attractive. Sexually, it's dead because he's the wrong partner. All right? So this awareness of what happens is important for us to understand. And again, you've got some of the citations on this on that list. All right? Now, let's talk about a couple of other things here. Let's do a short biology reminder here. This being a woman's cycle, this being her period over here. Okay? First phase over here after her period is called the follicular phase. Ovulation is roughly midpoint, but not exactly. It actually is numbered to over here. At the end of this cycle, it's either your period or you're pregnant. All right? And this being the luteal phase. All right? Now, our body alternates every other month which ovary is going to develop ovum. So what happens 2 or 3 months before is important to what's happening in your body. We have 2 ovaries the size of almonds, 2 fallopian tubes, our uterus, and our cervix. Note that the fallopian tubes do not touch the ovaries. The fact that a child is ever conceived is a miracle beyond belief because there's so many things that can go wrong. All right? So when we ovulate, there's about 10 ovum that prepare. Something triggers which ones will be ovulated, usually no more than 2. All right? They actually go into our abdominal cavity. All right? The fallopian tubes have little cilia, little hair-like things that create a suction, and that moves the ovum down here. All right? We have to know that many of us, 1 in 8 of us, is actually conceived as a twin. But we lose our twin early in the pregnancy. But I share that with us because some of us have this sense of somebody missing. I always thought I should have brother, sister, but I'll go back to that in a minute because there's another piece to this. But this awareness of the fact that I may have had a twin, there's a little bleeding episode, a teratoma, which is a little tumor that has hair and teeth in it, is an absorbed twin. Anybody with 2 colored eyes, that's an absorbed twin. All right? So more of us carry this information, genetic information about our twins than we realize. All right? Now, the other piece of this is that the sperm has to meet the ovum. And I don't know if you gentlemen know this, but your sperm is incapable of entering an ovum unless it is changed within the body of your partner. It sits here, for about, well, there's disagreement about how many hours, 3 to 5, some say a little more. It undergoes something called capacitation. And now it is feasible, it's possible, that if that sperm meets an ovum, it can enter, right? Now, there are 3 types of sperm. There are egg getters. You'll notice these are highly technical terms. Blockers and killers, all right? Work of a British guy, I think he played rugby, but I don't know, all right? But egg getters are the ones we're familiar with. You know, they're the sleek one, all right? And they find the ovum and enter. But did you know that only 1% of those millions of sperm are egg getters? 16% are blockers, and 83% are killers. What's the purpose of the killer? Well, go back to blockers for a moment. Blockers fill in the crypts of the cervix so that the egg getters can get through, all right? They don't get trapped down here. So the egg getters come up here and undergo capacitation. The role of killers is basically benign unless I have had multiple partners in a short period of time. In my body, there is now a sperm war going on. The killers of each male that I've had sex with are activated, and their intent is to kill the sperm of the other guy. You see there are some sports analogies here, right? I mean, on a very elemental level, there are some things that are just sort of innate, all right? But this is an important thing, because if I have this sperm war going on in my body, now I'm particularly susceptible to something called bacterial vaginosis. It is an infection that causes the interior of my uterus to change. Our uteruses are normally acidic, which give us some protection against infections and other things. Now it becomes alkaline, and now bacteria grow, and we have a problem going on, all right? We need to know that, by the way, you gentlemen have, your bodies are basically alkaline. And the last thing that's put on vitamin C before it leaves your body is a coating, or the sperm leaves your body is a coating of vitamin C, so that it isn't immediately neutralized in the body of the woman, okay? Now, we have to understand that what's going on here is very critical, all right? It's actually the ovum in the body that picks the sperm. We're not quite sure how it does, but it does. And attracts that sperm. That's the one I want, okay? The sperm is capable of the acrosome reaction, which means it enters the exterior of the ovum, and then the ovum seals itself off. No more can come in, all right? Amazingly complex. And we need to recognize there are things that can mess with all of this. We are told that the chemistry of pot is benign. Hey, it's a massive lie. Pot damages sperm unquestionably. Go online, look it up. Slows it down, changes the way it moves. And the chemistry of THC also is very similar to the chemistry that's going on here in terms of hormonal exchange and the receptor sites. THC blocks some of those receptor sites, or all of them. And when the baby is conceived and it comes down to build its placenta, because the baby's in charge, all right? Same chemistry is there. If THC is there, it may interfere, all right? We need to say this truth to people, all right? We need to speak this truth. Now, ovulation. We women, when we're ovulating, one, we smell differently. The males around us recognize that we're ovulating. You men have an arousal factor when you're with an ovulating woman, whether she's your wife or not, just females, all right? And you're more arousable, you're more interested, and you're more aggressive. When we women are ovulating, we dress differently. We dress to impress. A little more décolletage, a little more makeup. Hair's done a little better. Canada did a whole research piece on this, took spit samples from women, took photos every day, and then gave the photos to strangers and said, pick the ovulating woman. It's pretty easy. Yeah, they were pretty accurate, okay? Nature communicates because there's a little window, 24 hours that ovum is alive, all right? Sperm can live a little longer, but this real window of, you know, if you were to quiz people, when can you get pregnant? Many people don't have any idea. It must be the whole cycle, right? I mean, that's why we're going to take the pill the whole time, right? I mean, because, gosh, we could get pregnant any day, any time. That's not true. There's really this little time. Now, we have to recognize that we don't have to act on those urges, all right? Again, talking to young people. If sex seems like a good idea, go home and think about it for 24 hours in separate homes, all right? Because there's nothing that can so radically change your life. And it isn't just pregnancy, it's STDs. Most people contract a sexually transmitted disease the first time they have sex. Guys don't get STDs, you know, wake up one morning and they've been infected. They got it through some activity, all right? So that awareness is important for us to understand. You know, a funny story in our family, we have one daughter we refer to as Miss Never Had an Unspoken Thought. And she and her younger sister had heard me talking about this ovulation thing and how we dress differently and all that sort of thing. Her younger sister, who is by far my most conservative dresser, I mean, she really is very conservative, came down with décolletage and makeup and hair, and her older sister said, "What are you, ovulating? Go put your clothes on." Okay? So a little knowledge is a dangerous thing possibly, but it may not be dangerous. But we have to understand that there's this attraction there, okay? This is why women get pregnant the first time they have sex. I know I said it takes 6 months for her body to make the adaptation, but that doesn't mean she can't get pregnant, all right? And there might be issues of toxemia and some other things there because of this body reaction, all right? But that awareness. Over here in the luteal phase, these little spots where the ovum left become major chemical factories. That's what keeps the ovum alive here. It's what allows the baby to begin growing until the placenta is in place and the chemical factory of the placenta is working properly, okay? So this awareness of why all this is important, all right? Now, let me say a couple of other things here. Critical things that we need to know, all right? Are you aware that mothers carry cells from every child they ever conceived the rest of their lives? It's a phenomenon called microchimerism. Okay. These cells are everywhere in our body. They are present by 4 weeks after conception. They could be extracted from our bloodstream. At the same time, men perceive we're pregnant. I'll come to that in a minute. These cells are in our body. If this is the cell, the male that we parented this child with, these cells are reparative in our woman's body. If this is the male, they may cause things like scleroderma, all right? This autoimmune reaction. These cells, we also pass, you guys all have your mother cells in your body as well, all right? We have the cells of our children. And how many of you have older siblings? Guess whose cells you carry? Yeah, your mom gave them to you during pregnancy. But see, the knowledge, of biological knowledge of who's in our family. We don't know what they do, the sibling cells do, but we know they're present, all right? Question mark. But I know people who knew they had a missing sibling. Either an aborted sibling or a miscarried sibling. Because these kids say things like, I always thought I should have a big brother, big sister. They're usually specific unless there's multiple losses. There's biological knowledge of who is in our family system, all right? Now, think about this. If I have conceived children with many partners, perhaps aborted them, there's no tracking, subsequent children will carry cells of all of those children, which might set off autoimmune diseases in them, because this isn't their father. Question mark, okay? Still much research to be done, but this awareness, all right? There is an oncologist down in Pennsylvania who was at one of my talks and said, I have to tell you about our research. He said, when I have a woman who has tumors, I check to see which partner she has. If it's this partner, I check to see if she has sons. If she has sons, I extract the son cells from her body, inject them into the tumors, and the tumors die. All right? How awesome is that? Now, is there going to be research money for that? No. No, because nobody's going to make any money off it. It's a naturally occurring thing, all right? Now, there's another piece here. Again, nobody's going to make any money off of this. Breast milk kills cancer cells on contact. If you have 40 different kinds of cancer cells in petri dishes, you put breast milk on them, they will die on contact. They have extracted from breast milk 2 substances. One is called Hamlet, and I forget the second one, that they're using in this country to treat prostate cancer very effectively. There is a woman in Scandinavia, a doctor, who's treating brain cancer with this very effectively. This is a whole unfolding field. Again, no ill effects, all right? Children who are breastfed are less likely to get cancers. We mothers, by the way, are protected if we breastfeed our babies. We get a 7% protection for pregnancy, all right? You know, the amazing pieces of the human body. Again, is anybody going to promote that? No, not really, because again, it's a naturally occurring substance. There's not much money to be made from it, but there's huge gains to be made from that, okay? this awareness of how we are interconnected. I believe that mother's intuition might be related to that microchimerism business. Two of my own experiences, we had a daughter born with an invisible anomaly. I knew there was something wrong with that baby. And then she got this terrible kidney infection, she almost died, her electrolytes were screwed up. We found the doctor who said there's an anomaly. They did surgery, there is a miracle attached to this, but her kidney was only functioning at 5%, and 1 year later it was normal. Kidneys don't regenerate, and this world expert couldn't explain it. Okay, I can explain it, but okay. But I knew. And then I have a son, and my son smells a lot like my dad in terms of this pheromone thing. You know, if his clothes are in the wash, I swear my dad is in the house, even though he's been deceased for years. Anyway, son lived in Thailand. He's a communicator by trade. Personally, he's not so hot. And we used to call him every weekend, how's Thailand? Fine. How's your job? Fine. How's the food? Fine. Yeah, it's always fine. Talk to you next week. At one point I wake up, I have jaw pain. And I've never had jaw pain, and I couldn't even open my mouth. And I went in the bathroom and I took some aspirin, and the next day it was a little better, and the next day it was gone. Okay. Well, about 3 months later, he calls home and he begins the conversation by saying, hey Mom, did I tell you I went to the hospital? No, I would have remembered that. I didn't say that, but I know I would. I said, really, how long ago? Oh, about 3 months. Oh, really, what for? Oh, Mom, jaw pain. I couldn't open my mouth. And then they gave me medicine, and in 3 days it was gone. Now, think back to when we're living in this area with children, all right? We didn't have x-rays. We didn't have any of those things. The reality is, wouldn't it have made sense that I knew that kid was more fragile than that one? That if that one's sick, we got to pay extra attention, okay? That's my theory, but I think there's something to that, all right? Now, we need to know that men are changed by pregnancy. Did you get that? Men are changed by pregnancy, all right? That business about 4 weeks when the cell is in my body of my children, men perceive by scent that we're pregnant, all right? And we think for the most part it's our partner, but I will tell you that my husband's uncle was the only one who diagnosed a pregnancy in me that I miscarried. We went to a wedding and he goes, oh, congratulations! I'm like, what, Wally? He goes, you're pregnant! I said, I am? Oh yeah, you are. Well, I hadn't had a pregnancy test, I didn't have any symptoms, and I miscarried about a month later. Okay? Uncle Wally knew. But he was the father of many children. So this awareness, the first thing that happens to our father is he gets cortisol, okay, stress hormone, but also protect your bonding hormone. Cortisol is critical to protection and bonding. Then, 60 to 90% of men will experience something called kuvad, all right? I learned about that in an anthropology class, but I will tell you that many of our doctors and nurses do not know about this. Men experience symptoms of pregnancy with their partners, all right? 20% are really sick, they go to see the doctor. I'm nauseous, I'm throwing up, I'm really sick. I got headaches and backaches and toothaches and food cravings, and I've gained about 6 pounds. And the doctor says, there, sir, it's a virus. It's not. All right. These guys who are really sick, when the baby's born, are hardwired to know the difference between hunger cries, sad cries, and the whole 9 yards. The other guys have to learn it. All right? Now, about 6 weeks before the baby comes, his testosterone drops significantly. He gets more estrogen. Men do have a little estrogen, but now he gets a lot. This is about protecting and kindness and tenderness. Then he gets more cortisol, again, bonding and protection. He gets vasopressin, which is predominantly a male hormone. We women have some of it, but now he's got a lot of it. And this is one of the things about the lie, that I can have sex with anybody as a male and it doesn't matter. You can't turn this off. This gives you protection or preference for this female and makes you jealous of her. Now you can walk away, but you're changed by it. Whenever we as male or female engage in sexual intimacy, we cannot turn off the chemistry of bonding that happens in our body. It is physically impossible. All right? Footnote. When we women have unprotected intercourse with a male, we absorb the chemistry of the seminal fluid for 15 hours. Seminal fluid is one of the richest fluids in the human body, perhaps the richest. There are 30 different kinds of compounds in there that have to do with making the sperm last longer, swim better. Then there's a ton, there's zinc in there which protects our immune system, and there's all kinds of hormones, including 13 kinds of prostaglandins, follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone. Those are women hormones. You betcha. We absorb them. And probably in the early days when women did not get their periods until they were about 15, and their cycle did not become fully regular until they had their partner, it was probably related to the absorption of those hormones, all right? Possibly the pheromones as well. So he's got cortisol vasopressin, and then he gets prolactin. You know that? That's a nursing hormone. Yeah, he's got it for about 6 weeks. It makes him really nice, okay? Starbucks and diapers at midnight. But what's interesting is that with every subsequent pregnancy, he gets more prolactin. It's as though nature's saying, more responsibilities will give you more help, pal, okay? As these go back to normal, the one thing that never goes back to normal is testosterone. He went from being a hunter-aggressor to being a protector-provider. He has adequate testosterone, but it drops significantly. So men are permanently changed. In the monkey kingdom, where males care for the young, you know, carry them around and stuff, they actually get new brain cells in the prefrontal cortex, and they last until the young become independent. Nobody has done those brain scans on human males, that I'm aware of anyway. But this question of this bonding, these two becoming one, is very, very, very significant, all right? Now, I want quickly to touch on some of the things that happen when someone's on the pill, all right? Just briefly, because our time is basically up, but you need to know this stuff, all right? First off, 50% of women on the pill are depressed. Do we have an epidemic of depression in our country? Yes, we do. Do doctors, for the most part, ask her whether she's on the pill? No, they don't. They simply prescribe an antidepressant. But there's a lot of work being done out there in the secular community on the impact of the pill and how women are really getting tired of it, all right? It crashes your libido for many women. It's gone. Now, this is supposed to set us free, isn't it? I mean, we're supposed to be able to have sex all the time. It deadens our libido. We have now, this business I talked about, this emotional memory. We have, if we've been on the pill for a while, a male pattern brain. What does that mean? It means it's growing under brain scan as a male brain. If I show you that accident picture, you women now see it as a male. You focus on the core of the picture and you miss the peripheral stuff. That's a huge change. It's a systemic medication that affects our pituitary and has long-term implications in terms of lots of parts of our body. There are nutritional deficiencies that are associated with this. The World Health Organization declared the pill to be a type 1 carcinogen. All right? Now, this whole business about should we be paying for it, it seems to me that sort of the absurdity of this is shouldn't we also be paying for cigarettes then? That's another type 1 carcinogen according to WHO, and, asbestos. It's a little harder to buy asbestos for people, but cigarettes are pretty easy, okay? I mean, it's the absurdity of it, okay? You're more likely to contract an STD because it changes the mucus. There are 3 types of cervical mucus, and one of them tends to be a protector. It changes it. And in fact, you are more likely, according to some research, to contract the precancerous HPV if you're exposed, all right? If you are particular on Depo-Provera, which is the shot, it demineralizes your bones by 7% a year when it's supposed to be mineralizing. The chances of breast cancer following this are there on all of these. The potassium elevation, there are just a number of things. And now, we're saying, well, let's give girls IUDs. Isn't that great? They can have them in for 10 years. What happens to your uterus when for 10 years it is being irritated? That's the action of this. What you think there's going to be no consequence to this? All right, I mean, I'm raising this very serious question here. Plus, if we implant it with hormones, that's another issue. Okay, if it's got copper in there, that's another issue. The whole concept of let's get rid of our periods. One of the problems with this is that then we women develop iron overload. Our body is designed to give off, discharge every month. It clears the uterus. There are spiral arteries that feed our uterus. It's the only place in the human body these exist. And when it's time for a period, they screw themselves shut. Now, it's part of your cramping. As soon as the lining of the uterus begins to let loose, they turn themselves on and washes everything away. They never clot. I mean, it's the only place in the human body that clotting doesn't exist. But this awareness that cleansing, keeps us free from some things. We get rid of old sperm, we get rid of possible things that would be turned into infections. There's a lot of possibilities that we're messing with when we do this sort of thing, okay? Now, I share this with you because we must understand how awesomely we're made. We must understand how much this dance is there, that, men are changed, and there's still lots of stuff we don't know about men. There are a couple Canadian doctors who believe that males are also absorbing from us in the act of sexual intimacy. But we, for the most part, ignored you guys, and the research that has been done is either British or Canadian. But there's still many questions. But the fact of the matter is, we're designed to have a partner to whom our body has made an adaptation, both of us, and we continue with that. You see, when women are on the pill, one of the things that happens is in the community, men are not in the biological dance. Think about this. In the old days, the women were all basically cycling together. The men came back, children were conceived, all right, during that period of time, and then the men went away again. That's not happening in our society anymore, all right? If my wife is contracepting and I'm not having this testosterone arousal every month I'm supposed to have, this sweet young thing at the office who's not contracepting may set off my biology. I must be in love. I don't feel this way about my wife anymore. I wonder. And now there's an infidelity. And so there are these broken hearts out there. Multitudes, you guys all know this, multitudes of people with broken hearts caused by bad sexual decisions, in part because we have no idea, okay? You may not know this, but we have a major epidemic also of throat and mouth cancer caused by oral sex, because HPV is an equal opportunity infector. And there is a piece of research out there, whether it will be true or not, that maintains that in 2020 we will have more of that type of cancer than cervical cancer, all right? Who tells us these things, okay? We need to know that these decisions that are not really based on knowledge really bring much more damage with them than we ever anticipated, okay? Does anybody have a quick question? I am around all day, for questions. If you want to write a question down, I'm happy to do that for you. But please, ask questions, again, in the course of the day, also or during the panel. So hopefully, yes? Yeah, there are talks on DISC back there from a talk I gave at a Catholic parish in Virginia. So if you want those, there are also talks on YouTube. You never hear exactly the same talk twice, okay? I cover the material, but it's in a different order. But feel free to, access those things in terms of information. Let me give you an email address, because if something comes up and you want to contact me, feel free to do that. It's Vicki, THORN 2004, those are all small letters, believe it or not, at yahoo.com. I'll do my best to answer you. No, if I'm traveling, I do not carry a computer with me, so you have to wait till I get home. And if you don't hear from me in a couple weeks, write again, because things also go off into the cloud, or wherever it is that they go, not necessarily to your email. So thank you very much, and I look forward to being with you. Oh, we have a question back there.
Sorry, I have one question. When you mentioned about the men's hormones being changed, what affected that? Was that the pheromones, or was that something else?
We don't know.
Okay, it's just...
But we know that pheromones kick off the first change.
Okay.
So my hunch is it is pheromonally related, and my guess is that there's probably a change in our scent as we get closer to delivery that maybe sets off the rest of that. Again, we've ignored a lot of this, but the first run is pheromonally triggered.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.